Okay.
Us. It's us.
All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mangata Monday. Today we have Adam Carver with us from Bitgreen. Hi, Adam.
How's everybody doing out there? Good to be here, Tommy and Juliana. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. Like 2 weeks ago, we have this new format where we go on YouTube Live, and I see that we already have a few people with us here. So for anyone watching, you can always post your comments in the YouTube chat, and Juliana and I will be watching it, and we try to incorporate as much as possible into the conversation. Yes, Adam, hi, thank you for taking the time. Let's start very simple. You are representing Bitgreen. What is Bitgreen?
Well, Bitgreen is a parachain project in the Polkadot ecosystem. We're a team of 15. We've been working on our project, our parachain, for the last 15 months. So actually, we've been sufficiently under the radar for the last almost a year and a half. And we're a blockchain and an ecosystem that's committed to sustainability innovation on Web3. Now, that can mean many things, right? Sustainability, or people talk about climate change or carbon credits or financial inclusion. Sometimes sustainability can refer to financial inclusion, community activation, nonprofits, many things. What we're predominantly focused on right now is helping to blend financial capital markets with DeFi technology to create greater access for capital, particularly within European and North American countries, to flow into countries typically referred to as the global south, or formerly like third world countries, that are desperately in need of financial low cost of capital to finance things like energy transition and renewable energy, green jobs, microfinance, small and medium enterprise lending, and more. So there are so many different applications or interpretations of sustainability, but at its very core, one of the primary blockers to sustainability is a lack of access to credit markets and financial markets for those who are looking to raise equity or debt. What's fantastic is that distributed ledger technology in blockchain has as its fundamental product programmable, composable money. So in this scenario, maybe we can even talk about a few examples, and Mangata actually plays a role in this, is that there's a very close fit between the need for sustainable development, and that primary need is financial capital, and the actual product that blockchain can deliver. And so Bitgreen is going to be a parachain on top of Polkadot. We're focused on sustainability, innovation, and Web3. But our first app launches will relate specifically to raising capital for projects in the global south, renewable energy, microfinance, and SME lending.
All right, that's a very big entry that you're delivering here. It's a lot of huge topics, and I think blockchain is perfectly fit to provide access from both sides of the market to join this enterprise. Adam, I first met you when you were at the Amsterdam conference. Like I was part of the audience. I was listening to your presentation, and it was a very impressive presentation. I could get a little bit that you have a background also in finance, or maybe you can go a little bit into this. But so it seems like you have a history where you could learn a lot about finance and now combine it with a passion for sustainability. Is this right?
Yeah, well, I don't want to sound like a heretic to the Web3 community, but I do hail from TradFi. So in my 20s, I grew up around in the greater New York City area. My first job out of college, and then throughout my 20s, I worked I worked in credit finance and structured finance for Morgan Stanley and the Royal Bank of Scotland. So my job was to help finance credit issuances by like large corporations. And then I ended up eventually kind of being promoted onto a credit derivatives desk. So a lot of what we are building here at Bitgreen is informed in many ways like by my former experiences both in traditional finance, and then after in my 20s, after I left Morgan Stanley, I went to grad school to do a degree in energy systems because I thought I wanted to get in renewable energy investing. That never happened because when I graduated from graduate school, I then returned to New York and I began working in early stage venture capital. I worked for Techstars, a small VC here in town named Mesa Capital. Then that was sold. And then I went to go work for AngelList. I was the director of business development and investor relations and helped open the New York office for AngelList at a time when the company was, I think, like 15 or 16 people. And so I took my like banking experience, which obviously was capitalizing like very large multi-billion-dollar deals, or maybe smaller than that, like a couple hundred million, but still 9 figures and 10 figures and low 10 figures. And then moved into a complete almost inversion of that financing model, which is a seed stage startup where someone like lick your finger, put it in the air, and then conceive of valuation for a company. But my career had these like two very unique, different anchors at different ends of the spectrum for maturity and size of different companies, right? Early stage startups and then very large public companies. In 2018, I left AngelList and I co-founded a crypto company that didn't do very well, but it's informed in many ways what we are doing here at Bitgreen right now. So Bitgreen is, we'll probably get into this, it's a combination of much of the structured finance that I had done while working at Morgan Stanley, and as well kind of the open marketplace of ideas and financing that we helped to develop and then popularize at AngelList.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of very good circumstances that helps you come into the spot where you basically get a lot of the important background knowledge you need. I think it might also have helped form your character that you gave quite a good presentation at Amsterdam. And I think this is very important when you have a mission like this, where you need to convince a lot of people that have access to capital to participate in a market where then projects can come and apply for that capital. But how can I imagine?
Yeah, like credibility matters in finance. And no offense to any particular protocols out there, but I do think that in many ways is what many Web3 entrepreneurs and teams have missed.
Yeah, it's basically in crypto, a lot of people from traditional finance, but also from everywhere in the world come together, and it's this new, like, it's a soup where everything comes together and something new forms out of it. And a lot of it in traditional finance, a lot of the structures that have been established make sense, and so they're getting replicated now in decentralized finance. But also you get a lot of new influences. And I guess many people think that they can turn everything around, but yeah, it's going to be something new that just gives more people access, and if they have the right talent, the right skill set.
I'm very much in agreement with what you just said, Tommy. And I think that there's like the entrepreneurial zeal and passion and drive of the Web3 community and its builders is totally admirable. And like I love observing it, and I love even more being part of that tidal wave. But we should be careful not to forget that, corporate finance and traditional finance have been around for nearly 100 years. And there's a huge corpus, like a canon of learnings and research and best practices that have gone into how we actually value companies by their intrinsic value, or forecast earnings, or do accounting, or even account for taxation for our taxes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's the risk is that we try to throw everything out, all of those learnings and all of the canon, all the good stuff, because it just happens to be associated with TradFi in preference for looking at, trying to innovate in DeFi. But I think that we're going to begin to see the melding, or probably the blending of these two communities come together. I'm an example of that. Bitgreen is an example. And I think that that's where some of the most profound innovation is going to happen over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I think it also works in the other direction. I think it will also help to create much more financial literacy among people that wouldn't have thought about going that route before. So I myself like try to continuously learn about new stuff that I wouldn't have thought about 2 years ago. Today,
Right.
I'm a lot into inspecting on-chain data, and I start to read out KPIs from platforms. I'm starting with Magata, and I will also go for other platforms, but I start reading out the PE ratio for Magata. We only started 1.5 months ago, so maybe it's too early 2 months ago, so maybe it's too early to read it. It's right now, it's like 3,700. But it gives you like the KPIs that from TradFi, they give you the tools to think about like how would you think if something is economically sustainable, maybe to reach back to our original topic.
Yeah, I mean, what are some of the I'll just ask you, like what you mentioned PE ratio, right? Price over earnings. What are some of the other ratios or formulas or data points that you've kind of discovered, let's say from that are not crypto native, but from the TradFi world that have kind of like helped to demystify for you how crypto is or should be valued?
I'm certain that there are like defined terms for this, but a lot of the stuff I'm looking up for myself, and so I give them my own words. One thing, for example, is the ratio of volume to the liquidity locked, which is basically sort of how much money goes around for the capital, invested. I think it should be a video for another day. Maybe let's focus on Bitgreen again.
Sure.
Because I would look bad here now, and maybe I should learn the correct.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but there's so Bitgreen is a DeFi protocol, right? What we're trying to do is use decentralized finance and many of its technological advancements to do what? To aggregate capital more efficiently than is currently possible in the TradFi world through large institutions. So number one, capital aggregation. Number two, post-transaction settlement can be done faster, swifter, more affordably over a distributed ledger. And then those are, by the way, those are like enormously costly activities at banks. Like for every trader or investment banker at a bank, you maybe have like 6 or 7 operations people, right? Doing confirmation, settlements, a variety of different tasks. So we have the aggregation of capital, post-transaction settlement, and then of course the transparency and then the auditability, having an audit trail for the actual transactions themselves. Now within the sector that Bitgreen is focused on, which is impact investing, you actually do not have the same type of institutions who are participating in those markets because those markets are smaller, they're more geographically distributed, they're more bespoke. Because of that, many of the deals are in and of themselves kind of like customized and different. And so then you don't have the transparency, the standardization of reporting and metrics. Like that's what's so great about it, as a segue to what you and I were just talking about. What PE ratio does, or what cohorts analysis does for a VC, is it standardizes the data so that an analyst who is like somewhat skilled in understanding how to read these things, kind of like a doctor reads an x-ray, can try to make sense, like use those heuristics to make sense of the strength of a company. Well, when you have deals that are not standardized in their reporting, are geographically like distant and span different geographies and jurisdictions, those deals then don't trade, right? And basically there is almost no present secondary market for impact investments. Like it just doesn't exist in a liquid way. Most deals that are financed, their paper just sits on the balance sheets of the financier, which could be a family office or an institution or others. And obviously what you're doing is you're trying to actually introduce liquidity into the market because you realize the value that you're creating, right? Even though you extract a tiny commission, you're creating so much more value because you're creating liquidity and transparency amongst different assets, different coins. And so what Bitgreen is attempting to do is that we're looking at what currently exists in the traditional financial market, borrowing those best practices, and then trying to apply the radical advancements and advantages of distributed ledger technology to aggregate capital, creating more access to capital, do the post-transaction settlement, and then also create like an auditable and transparent reporting mechanism on chain, so that we can begin to standardize some of the data that's coming in from these investments, and then hopefully make those as standardized as, let's say, credit card receivable data or mortgage data and mortgage performance payment data, right? And if we can accomplish that at Bitgreen, then suddenly we can open up like huge, massive coffers of capital that is earmarked to go into these ESG and impact investments, but right now is pretty much sidelined because there are not kind of like official and high throughput mechanisms for them to participate. And that's kind of that's the nut that we're trying to crack here for Bitgreen. We're not simply looking to tokenize an existing carbon credit. That's cool, but it's not that innovative. We're looking to create a brand new on-chain market for digital green investing, borrowing the best practices that we can observe from traditional finance and then putting those practices on chain.
Hey, Eden, thank you so much for that explanation. I think it gives us a lot of context. But I have a question, and that maybe it's a very common question that you get, even though you kind of answer it already, but I would still like to ask this. So we know the traditional companies that are working with sustainability, right? So we have Greenpeace, we have WWF, right? And then now we have Bitgreen. And normally people are like, what's the difference between this and what you're going to build right now? Because we already have that. Let's say we already have this kind of companies. So you mentioned capital distribution, you mentioned transparency, you mentioned post-transaction settlements. So is that the main difference? Is that exactly the main difference between what traditional finance is doing regarding sustainability and what Web3, in this case, Bitgreen, is doing regarding this topic?
Yeah, it's a great question because there are many problems that some blockchain teams are trying to solve with technology, where the underlying problem is actually not a technology problem, it's just a human problem, right? And there are certain tasks that you just cannot abstract and then codify and put on a blockchain. So for Bitgreen, for example, we try to be careful when we make claims about what we want to do, that they are actually problems that can be solved with technology rather than human problems. A really great example here, let's say, would be the origination of carbon credits and then the ongoing like maintenance, or what's known as MRV, measurement, reporting, and verification of the project. So let's say, for example, that there's like a large plot of land in Southeast Colombia, right, or in Peru, or in Acre, Brazil, in the Amazon, and there's a carbon credits project that's underway. So in order to actually execute that project, it typically takes anywhere from 18 to 24 months from the time that there's a decision made to actually pursue a carbon credits project in a specific part of that world. It could take 24 months to actually get that project up to the point in which it is able to be certified and then issue credits for sale. That's an insane metric, right? At the rate that the Amazon is actually being deforested, at the rate that climate change is occurring, that we actually are unable at this point to do any better than 24 months of turnaround to go from identifying and negotiating with a local community or an indigenous tribe that there is mutual interest for everyone to try to conserve and secure like a biodiversity corridor or some plot of land that needs to be conserved, to the point where that local community can actually receive revenue from the sale of carbon credits That's 24 months, right? And at the same time, those local communities are continuously under threat by illegal loggers, miners, narcotraficos, palm oil agriculturists who are very actively bribing and sometimes, unfortunately, threatening members of those local communities, right? They need this basic income now. And so what can blockchain do here? Well, the alternative or the baseline is 24 plus months, right? What can blockchain do? Well, number one, it can help to first facilitate the direct transfer of capital to those people immediately, rather than going through 4 or 5 intermediaries. Like, this is a very common use case for blockchain, right? Instead of going through multiple different intermediaries, like Bitgreen is actually working on a project in Peru where we would be able to just send cryptocurrency into the capital city and then have some trusted partners on the ground who could distribute that, rather than having like bags of cash and then putting that cash on a boat with people with weapons and then having to go from village to village to distribute the cash. So number one is an efficient way to directly make payments into some places in the world that are just where the people are not necessarily banked. Number two, it takes an excruciating amount of time to actually send people, carbon auditors, on the ground into the Amazon with a clipboard and a tape measure to measure the diameter of trees and then count the number of trees within, called like a 20 by 20 meter plot, and then do soil readings. That's the way that it's currently done. And it actually is fairly scientific, but it's extraordinarily slow. And there are many locations in the Amazon, for example, where you just can't access, or you go in and it takes an inordinate amount of time where you can't access during certain times of the year. Now we have satellite imagery that's coming online. It's known as remote sensing. We have cell phones where local community members can actually take pictures, videos, upload those videos, take other readings, and get paid directly with crypto as a reward, or basically as compensation. So using remote sensing technology as well as mobile technology, imagery and photography, and crypto payments can actually create local jobs and local economy. And then just the last piece of this one example for carbon credits. One problem with carbon credits is that after you begin issuing the carbon credits, that project continues for the next 15 or 20 years in some cases. Now, what's beautiful about a carbon credit project is it's actually a form of wealth transfer. When you buy a carbon credit and retire it, the majority of that money is supposed to go back to the community, right? Somewhere in the Amazon, let's say, to provide a subsidy to their income so they don't feel the need to deforest the land. Like, that's really what's happening here. It's a form of wealth redistribution. It's a beautiful thing. But there is currently no good way to economically continue to verify that, like 2 years, 3 years into the project, the people who live on the land haven't deforested it so they can raise soybeans to feed cows that will become tacos in America, right? But we can actually take remote sensing technology, phones, and other data, pipe in that information to a blockchain that's verifiable and encrypted and is totally transparent and auditable for everyone to see, so that we can continue to understand the underlying performance of that conservation project, wherever it may be. And that's just one example that I shared. But there are other ways that blockchain and distributed ledger technology are going to be able to maybe revolutionize and maybe just improve, but markedly improve, the process of traditional finance for these green markets.
Well, thank you for answering the question. I think everybody got a good example of how is it gonna work in terms of the difference between traditional finance and Web3.
Think of sending $100 million or $50 million or even $10 million from New York City to Nairobi, Kenya, or to Iquitos, Peru, or to some communities that are on the other side of the Ucayali River in Peru. Those dollars need to pass through multiple different intermediaries, each of whom extracts their own value. And there's hardly an audit trail as that money, as the capital passes hands. And then the worst of all is we don't really know how much money is received by the individuals on the ground who need it. And then we don't have a very good way to then verify the type of activities that are expected of them as consideration for the payment. And blockchain is going to be able to not just create a small improvement in auditability, but the type of technologies that blockchain will then enable, such as remote MRV or digital MRV, measurement, reporting, and verification, that's what's going to be revolutionary for some of these markets. And we'll see that within the next, I don't think it'll be in the next year, maybe not 2 years, but 2 to 4 years, 2 to 5 years, it's going to be really dramatic and exciting.
And then you also mentioned something that for me is like very curious, that it's about the transferring of the crypto to fiat. Why? Because I am from Colombia, and I also know that here is still sometimes difficult to pay with a card. Sometimes if you don't have cash, you are not able to pay. So you mentioned that you have to have someone, an entity or person, I don't know, whatever you call it, on the ground that it's able to help you do the transfers. How is it gonna work? Because we come back to the point that there is a third party that is gonna take a part of the money. So how can we make this how do I say it, like sustainable in terms of like how the money got
like the
to
system, how is the system self-reinforcing without intermediaries? Look, it's a really huge challenge. Here in the US, I'm in New York, and when we talk about disintermediating third parties, we're often talking about the banks, like the big evil banks or Visa, because we kind of have a notion of like how the system may operate without them, because many of us are in areas with good cell reception. We have bank accounts, and we have, if, for example, here, many people, and some not, are kind of like groomed to understand like saving, like long-term saving, and how to manage cash. But there are places in the world where that's just not part of the culture, and they aren't really enabled with the same type of technology that we here in the US are kind of entitled to, but it's new for them. So if you have, for example, like, here's kind of a predicament that some nonprofits have, right? Let's say that you have a community somewhere in the world that has been living like near the poverty line or impoverished poverty line. And then you bring them some brand new source of income, huge amount of income, like a carbon credits project. What do? Do you just helicopter cash on the community all at once in the middle of the selva, without any type of security or protection? Suddenly that creates other problems. That's no longer just a matter of financial inclusion, but also the safety of the community, like the recipient parties, right? Or, have you done a proper job of helping them understand what it means to receive a bulk payment and to need to, save that capital? Or then, like, where do they save it? If it's not in cash, if it's digital currency and they're unbanked, well, where do they put it? Like, they put it in USDC, they put it in Bitcoin. So there are all these other questions that the technology, what's beautiful, again, like blockchain can solve questions of technology, which I think is one related to financial inclusion and disintermediating many third parties that are extractive. But now we're talking about a human problem. How do you deliver $100,000, $500,000 to a community in the jungle that does not have a bank account, right? And does not have its own security apparatus in an area where there are armed entities, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of lawless. It creates a variety of different challenges. And so while I don't have an answer, what Bitgreen has been doing is trying to connect with many groups on the ground who have been doing business and nonprofit work for decades to learn what some of the best practices are. And we're trying to learn from them, and we will likely partner with those groups, because now we're talking about like distribution, last mile distribution. And then eventually, again, like as we begin to learn these systems and processes, we can hopefully begin to codify them, put them into code, and then take some of those human problems, make those technology problems, and then develop technology solutions. But it's hard for me to imagine that in many circumstances that we would be capable of totally disintermediating third parties without seeing a disruption in kind of the societal foundation and framework that has been built on top of this, you know, the pillars of TradFi. Because some of those things are good, right? How about like auditable reporting and standardization? How much would that have helped investors in Terra and Luna or Celsius?
Or just how you build an efficient market that connects the right people. Adam,
what's up?
Adam, so basically Bitgreen is built on the idea of sustainability, and now you have exposure to so many different people and groups that all have like this specific ideas, or you basically like you start building your to-do list for Bitgreen, and it just keeps going on and on and on and on with 100,000 things to do. How do you take all that, and how do you build a roadmap where you basically have to prioritize and say, we do this thing first and then this, and basically build use cases that show the world that we can do it?
Well, I think that Bitgreen is in a unique use case, a unique scenario, in that by virtue of what we're doing, we are stating to the world, like, we are a brand that you can trust because of our mission, our vision for what we want to accomplish. Like, I was at a dinner party in New York months ago, and I walked in and I was talking to this woman. And of course, in New York, the conversation leads to like, what do you do? What do you do? Right? Everyone's sizing each other up in New York. And I mentioned that I'm in blockchain, and she said, oh, I don't know anything about blockchain. And I thought, well, good. Now I don't need to like explain exactly what I do. But then she said, try me. Tell me about your company. So I casually said, I'm the CEO of a company named Bitgreen. And she responded, oh, I've already got it. You're like Bitcoin, but you're good. Right? So she just like nailed it. Like, we pay marketing people and we have some incredibly talented, but she nailed it, right? And so Bitgreen is a little bit unique in our prioritization, because we also need to take that sentiment that she had, right? Which was, you, Bitgreen, are a trusted, like, you're worthy of my trust. You're worthy of like me learning about. I'm curious because of what you want to do and deliver for the world. Not every other protocol has that. It's just kind of, it's unique, right? So our prioritization puts trust and credibility at the very top. And we realize that we need to jump through certain hoops and play by the rules of some established entities and interest groups, because they've been in our game longer than we've been playing. So, for example, on carbon credits, it's like it is of paramount importance to us to ensure that we have the highest level of conviction in the quality of the credits that we're going to be selling. The same as with our like digital green bond platform, right? The deals that we're going to be bringing to the market have to be deals that we have some level of security that they are real and truthful. Now, obviously, blockchain and lots of like blockchain proponents like to say, like, caveat emptor, buyer beware, do your own research. And sure, that's true. But my experience at AngelList tells me that that's not how the market operates. That's not how investors want to participate on a platform. They want to participate in a platform that they can trust. So there is a question of, how do you establish trust in this trustless regime? For Bitgreen, right now, our top priority is trying to establish that trust and that brand. Second, in terms of technology, there's a high level of focus on transparency and reporting. which you'll see. The type of we'll have a carbon credits marketplace and an impact investing platform that kind of hails from like a Kickstarter and AngelList UI and UX. And we're going to try to provide as much data as possible and objective data as we can to global investors so that they can actually do some research and make their own decision. And after that, the last point I'll make is for every marketplace, and you guys are no different, there's always this question of like, how do you solve the cold start problem? Chicken and egg, right? We need liquidity, and then in order to have liquidity, we need investors, but investors only show up when there's liquidity. How do you solve that? Well, I believe the answer is chicken and egg. It's chicken. You have to choose one. And I think that the ultimate scarce resource is always capital. You always want to build the investor community first, because there will always be entrepreneurs and deals who are looking for capital. That's what I think AngelList did so well. That's what I think banks do, right? Banks just have money, so then the deals find them. So for Bitgreen, the primary business development focus actually is not on sourcing the deals just yet. It is attracting the investor liquidity. That's a lesson that I've learned over the past 8 to 10 years in startups and VC.
Yeah, it makes sense. A lot of people are talking about the next wave of users, but in a way, what I gather here is there is also a next wave of institutions that are joining. And
Right.
Basically, you need to provide them with the tools that they can tick the boxes on their due diligence list. And that's something that I've learned when talking with a hedge fund manager recently, is like, we cannot go for Polkadot because we cannot do the due diligence. We don't have the tools yet.
That's right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. The 99.9% of the world and all of TradFi and all of the fiat currency has a certain protocol for operating. Now we can debate and argue, like, is that protocol morally right or morally wrong? Is it rationally justifiable or not? Is it the most efficient or isn't it? Like, we can debate that all day long. But the reality is that when you're an asset manager, when you're D.E. Shaw, when you're Bridgewater hedge fund, when you're an insurance company, almost any private equity investor, right? Your number one task is capital preservation. The people who work at those firms are not known for like being like slinging DeFi contracts or yield farming or taking chances. They were hired because they're boring, right? There may be like very boring people, and they're hired because they're boring and mundane, and they don't go chasing yield on Luna or Anchor, right? They have a way of doing things, and it's incumbent on us, I think, at least for Bitgreen, to meet them where they are. And then upon seeing them at that place, try to educate them and then warm them to Bitgreen and then blockchain technology and distributed ledger and smart contracts, right? It is on us to try to educate them, bring them to where we are. But first, we need to go to their offices. And we need to demonstrate to them that everything that we're doing is safe, secure, I believe compliant, depending on what your protocol does, right? For Bitgreen, we have a high level of focus on compliance. We've spent a lot of money, tons of brain power, late nights, lawyer fees, in order to set ourselves up to be a compliant DeFi platform. Because we know that the only way that we're going to raise the type of money for green investing that we are targeting, so we're targeting $1 trillion within a decade. The only way you get to a number that big is to be compliant. There's just not enough retail cash. You can go from low millions to maybe mid millions and maybe even $1 billion or some small numbers. But that's not a blip on the radar screen when we think about this, what's known as the $50 trillion funding gap in sustainability to reach the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals within 10 years and 20 years. Bloomberg estimated that that's a $50 trillion funding gap. That's, let's see, what is the total TVL in DeFi right now? Like,
is it trillion?
Right.
I have my chart, but
We're talking orders of magnitude larger than the entire crypto market cap and DeFi.
probably.
And if we want to get to those type of numbers, so I'll say it differently, right? If we want to keep the earth from burning up, or having this last summer, which was the hottest on record, being the coldest summer for the rest of our lives, right? We need to take radical action immediately. And we need to start pouring money into conservation and renewable energy and adaptation, right? All of these different sectors that are just unloved by TradFi, right? Raising $1 billion doesn't move the needle. $10 billion doesn't really move the needle. We're talking about hundreds of billions and into the trillions of dollars. It's the ultimate moonshot. And if Bitgreen or anyone else aspires to actually move the needle and do something that makes a real difference beyond just greenwashing and like patting ourselves on the back and feeling like we're good people, like we actually want to make a difference, then we need to connect to institutions that have billions of dollars earmarked for these type of investments. They're not going to touch us or even take a meeting if our organizations are not compliant and if we're not transparent and if we don't have leadership on these teams that is not like talking shit to everyone to every grifter on Twitter. Right? They're used to doing business with adults and professionals. And there will be many blockchain teams that issue that strategy and that approach, but there will be many successful teams who realize that we need to go to where the existing investors and users are, meet them in their place, and then slowly woo them to our philosophy and our way of doing business.
Yes. So, and I'm aware that you're doing a very important next step today.
Yeah, did you see me checking my phone here for a moment? I don't have it up right now, but Bitgreen actually launched its parachain crowd loan last night. And you could actually find that on Polkadot.js. We launched it last night. I think just before this, before we came on the air, we had about $33,000 committed. And the most exciting part was the actual Polkadot auction went live about 20 minutes ago. So I don't even know at the moment where Bitgreen stands in the auction.
I'm going to have a look in a minute.
I'm like beyond on the edge of my seat right now.
If I find the right menu.
Right. I can't wait to like finish the call and go and check what's going on.
Yeah, I know.
It's like I'm trying.
I feel like it's election night.
Like I'm
trying. But that's what's happened. We've been working on this project now for over a year. We have 15 incredible employees. It feels like family to me. But we've been largely under the radar. Like there are many teams, maybe 5 to 8 teams that are all doing some form of like climate crypto, carbon crypto, who get tons of press. And we just like been very quiet, put our heads down, have not had any type of articles, no podcasts. Recently we began doing live events. I met you just in April in Amsterdam, right? That was the first event that we have done in a year of working on the project. And now we raised a round of funding last November. We haven't even announced it. But now with the parachain, with the crowd loan and the parachain auction, we're beginning to come out of our cave and introduce ourselves to the world. So it feels really great and special to be on this crowdcast with the Mangata community and with the two of you, and simultaneous with that to have our parachain auction go live.
Yeah, congratulations. It's a huge step when you actually push the trigger. You still know there's going to be the whole process, and then some time, and then the chain launches, and then.
Hey, Tommy, it's Electro Renegade's commenting on YouTube, and he says 32,000 dots.
That's amazing. So that's where our loan was. But are we winning the auction at the moment?
Well, Electro Renegade is the one informant, so I'll be waiting for Electro Renegade. Thank you so much for the data.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting run. I mean, I'm not sure each crowd run runs for 2 weeks or so, but I guess there is a full cycle in which you basically can join.
Yeah, it's 5 days. The way that the
Okay.
reverse candle auction works, there's what's known as the ending period. That's 5 days. So we just initiated the ending period, and then effectively, like the best way to strategize to win a reverse candle auction is to try to be in the auction leader position for as long as possible. Every 2 minutes are effectively like a lottery ticket throughout the reverse candle auction. There are 3,600 lottery tickets during the 5-day period. And so every 2 minutes is a new lottery ticket, and the lottery ticket is appropriated or given to whichever parachain has the highest bid during that 2-minute window. So it's not about having the highest bid at the end. It's not about dying with the most toys. It's actually about collecting the most amount of toys throughout the entire candle auction process.
Okay, so let's hope it works out for you. I have a question from YouTube here. So what's in it for the crowdrun participants? So what's basically what's the tokenomics of Bitgreen? What's the value proposition?
Bitgreen has pre-mined 1 billion coins, similar to Polkadot, and we have a very low staking emissions rate of just 2%. And so the crowd loan offering is that for every DOT loaned, we will be offering 15 Bitgreen network tokens.
All right,
so you would be collecting Bitgreen network tokens in advance of our, well, not in advance of our launch, because we'll probably go live before we make that first distribution. But it's effectively you would be lending DOT into the smart contract by supporting Bitgreen's bid for the auction. And then we will be remunerating, airdropping people Bitgreen network tokens at the end. And right now the ratio is 15 Bitgreen network tokens for every 1 DOT that is loaned.
Oh.
So what can users expect to do with the token?
So it's intended to be a utility token. Very likely the first app that we launch has nothing to do with environmentalism. In fact, it's a game for developing better habits and for peak performance. And so in this game, a user would be able to create a profile and set their own user targets for their like good behaviors that they want to encourage and that they aspire to do, like meditating for 10 minutes, doing some yoga in the morning, push-ups, getting to bed at a certain time, right? Not drinking alcohol, not smoking pot, etc., right? So it is a game where users can actually set their behavioral targets, and then they play this game over the course of a month with other players. And the way that they use the Bitgreen network token is that they actually take their own network tokens and they stake them as a deposit at the beginning of the game, almost as a deposit against their fulfillment of their goals at the end of the month. And if they reach their goals or their point total, they get their BBB back. And if they don't reach their total, then that BBB gets donated to a charity of their choice. So the coin itself actually is a utility token in that it's very much like it's like a token at an arcade. And that token also then becomes the currency for the purchase and retirement of tokenized carbon credits and some other products that we will have on the chain itself. So you would need to have possession of the network tokens in order to access these apps.
I see. Okay, so it's basically you're building out some behind-the-scenes use cases by basically using the token, locking it up, transferring it to a charity in a certain case, and then
I mean, in that way, like it's an access token, just like an arcade, right?
Right.
And the great thing about Bitgreen here, or one of the interesting pieces, is that like fundamentally we're a parachain team. Like our aspiration is just to be an infrastructure team. But because there are so few other players in Web3 that are innovating on sustainability, well, we had to then also develop our own layer 3 apps. The carbon credit platform, the green debt, impact investing marketplace, the habits formation game, and we have some other things happening too, related to recycling, related to community activation. It's rare for a blockchain team to also be building the apps on top of its own chain, right? But we need to show, we realized, or back to your question, Tommy, about prioritization, we realized early on that we need to show the world what is possible by innovating in sustainability on Web3 and doing that on top of Bitgreen and doing it within the .summit ecosystem. And so we have some other teams right now who are beginning to build on top of our chain. We have some really fantastic MOUs with some companies that you're familiar with, actually. But we had to build our own apps to demonstrate what we think this chain is capable of, and to demonstrate just how sprawling and how vast and how prolific this whole notion of sustainability is. Like, you may be asking, what does the habits gain or behaviorism have anything to do with Amazonian conservation and sustainability? Fundamentally, conservation doesn't stand a chance if people are unhappy, right? Or when there's just a rampant like when there is childhood obesity, childhood diabetes, when people are smoking, when they're drinking, when they're just unhappy with their own lives, feeling separate and isolated, they're not going to care about the environment, right? They're not going to care about anything beyond their own survival requirements. The habits game is a way of creating community, of helping people become more aware and conscious of kind of their unconscious behaviors, why they do certain things, why they're constantly checking their phone, maybe, right? Why they're maybe reaching for that ice cream in the refrigerator. And so fundamental to sustainability is this sense that we are all part of a larger collective and a larger community. And so for Bitgreen, the reality is that we are going to fail if all we do is raise capital for renewable energy or conservation. Because if people are still feeling unhappy, unhealthy, and separate from each other, then we've already sowed the seeds for future problems. But if we only look at developing community, then, and we haven't raised the capital for sustainability, then this $50 trillion gap still persists. Bitgreen needs to do both. And in the default world, off-chain world, we need to do both. We need to figure out how to channel our resources, coordinate those resources toward endeavors and issues that matter. And at the same time, we need to focus on people, financial inclusion, community inclusion, education, minority rights, women's rights, right? We need to be doing both of these things because actually they're like one and the same. They have the same roots. Even though we see their symptoms as being separate, their root problems are the same. And Bitgreen is trying to kind of straddle those two objectives and mandates.
I think it also shows an intention to build not only a product, but also the community around it that eventually has to use it. And I think people that are aware of that their own habits and that they can do something with their habits and basically like play a gamified version of training their habits, I think is a good initial community to tap into, to reach out to more people that would be community for Bitgreen.
Yeah, I mean, how many millions and millions of people set New Year's resolutions and then fail? Mostly because like people are not good at forming better habits. It's hard. They don't do it with friends. So you have to like wake up early to do yoga yourself or meditate by yourself or read a book by yourself. So creating community, having a gamified environment, and then also, by the way, using the blockchain as this encrypted database where people can enter private information. And then we can actually standardize that info, aggregate that data, and then provide people with actual like prescriptive tips and best practices and notions for like, let's say, I mean, we've kind of seen this already, but like there are certain behaviors that then result in a predictable positive or negative behavior the next day. Like, let's say staying up really late and like drinking a fifth of vodka, right? Or just staying up late or eating late, right? Science shows right now that eating after 8 p.m., 9 p.m., when your digestive system has slowed down considerably, you're not turning that food into energy at an efficient rate anymore, reduces your heart rate variation, basically the restfulness of your sleep. Even if you rest the same amount of hours during the evening, your body is struggling to digest that food while you've slept. So through the game and using the blockchain, we're actually able to begin to aggregate this data and sift through that data and then divine or derive additional like tips, tricks, best practices, and guidance so that people aren't necessarily flying blind trying to lose 20, 25 pounds or start a new habit or like refortify their relationships with their partner or their children or their friends or at work. So yeah, there is a great way here to actually establish community and again, build trust with users by offering them this like free game that's fun and is like really hopefully a positive influence in their lives. And all they need to do is own the token and then basically bet on themselves.
I was just going to say it's, but yeah,
what's
please.
Supply, because we have that question and we're coming to the end of this call and it's been amazing, but let's try to answer some questions that the community has. So one of the questions is what's the total supply?
1 billion tokens.
1 billion. Okay, there you go with your answer.
1 billion tokens, 2% annual emissions rate.
Okay.
On top of the billion. It is an infinite supply model similar to Polkadot.
So here I got another question. I think this one is from Matthew that says, if I contribute less than 100 dots to the crowd loan, will I receive rewards?
Yeah, Matthew, don't worry about it. That's fine. Actually, people have been sending in, the dot minimum is 5 dot. We wrote that on the webpage and then realized that we have no way of enforcing it. So go ahead and you can submit any amount of dot above 5 or 5 and above.
Okay, perfect.
And our crowd loan page, in case people are just interested in what Matthew is actually looking at right now, it is bitgreenswiss.org/crowdloan.html. So Bitgreen, we often use, well, we have typically used the website bitgreen.org, but Bitgreen actually, the chain is a Swiss association. It's a Swiss nonprofit association that owns the blockchain and then issues tokens. So for the crowd loan, we use the website bitgreenswiss.org/crowdloan.html.
Crowd loan.
I'm putting it on the screen for everyone to see, so that is bitgreenswiss.com, and then you can click on crowd.
It's bitgreenswiss.org because we're a nonprofit.
Oh, .org. All right.
bitgreenswiss.org/crowdloan.html.
Right.
And then you'll be able to see what Matthew is referencing here. We had something up there that said minimum loan of 100 dot, but we're not able to enforce that. So actually, participate at any level they want, 5 and above, 5 dot and above.
Perfect. Do you have more questions here?
Lightning round, let's do it.
We have a few questions. I wouldn't drag it too much out, but I think one question is interesting is if you can talk about any partnerships already. They are pointing specifically at Parallel or Bifrost, sure. But it's always
I can talk about some partnerships where we have signed MOUs. And by the way, if folks have any additional questions, if you go to our website, which you had just shared, there is a little messenger on the bottom right-hand corner, and that will send us, it'll send a message to my team, and if no one happens to be like at the channel immediately, we'll also receive an email and we'll respond to you. But we would respond via email, so make sure to drop your email address in if you'd like a response from us. But that's a great way to follow up with us. Just go to the website and there's the little chat box on the bottom right-hand corner. So a few MOUs. On the green financing marketplace, or the digital green bonds, we have an MOU with a developer in West Africa that's building a $100 million renewable energy hydropower plant. And we were brought into this transaction by an organization named GEAPP, G-E-A-P-P, Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet. That's a nonprofit that was founded last year by the Rockefeller Foundation, Bezos Earth Fund, and IKEA family. And they're looking to begin transitioning some of their nonprofit and impact investing to blockchain, and maybe doing that with Bitgreen. And so they had brought us in on this incredibly impactful hydropower plant in West Africa that in a country where 75% of the population has no access to electricity. It's like the very definition of impact. And so Bitgreen has an opportunity to finance our technology platform to help to raise $10 million of debt for that deal. Another MOU that we've signed is with another very well-known crypto carbon credits company named Flow Carbon. You probably saw that they were financed. They're supported by Cello. They're supported by Andreessen Horowitz. One of the co-founders is Adam Newman from WeWork. So Flow is going to be deploying its app on top of Bitgreen for its Polkadot footprint. What we're beginning to see right now is that many of the carbon-based crypto platforms or apps, and some of the others that were initially gravitated to maybe Polygon because that's where ClimateDAO was and Toucan were located. Those third-party apps are actually looking to be multi-chain, right? There's no reason why they wouldn't. And so they gravitate to Bitgreen as their chain of choice, as their landing within the .Sama ecosystem. So for us, we're more than happy to support Flow Carbon and Toucan. We have nothing signed with them yet, or other companies that we have signed with as their preferred landing within the .Sama ecosystem. As those third-party apps choose to be multi-chain, they're looking for a preferred partner within Polkadot. And the advantage of us being our own parachain is that they know that Bitgreen is committed to the same values and has the same mission, and that we're going to generate that ecosystem and that network effect of investors on our chain for these type of common goods, products, and apps.
Oh.
The funny thing, just I'll leave it one quick anecdote. Another great anecdote was the girl who said oh, you're Bitcoin, but you're good. But the other one was one of these major partners, one of those three families that I mentioned to you, that deal fell on our lap. And almost all of our deals right now come in totally organic, because what happens is that people will go to Google and they type in green cryptocurrency or Bitcoin sustainability, and they find Bitgreen. And that's becoming a huge advantage for us in terms of top of funnel deal flow.
That's amazing.
I feel like the values you mentioned initially, creating the trust first and creating a brand that signals the trust and the safety is the right thing to do. I think you bring the right experience, and so it seems you're building something really awesome for the Polkadot ecosystem.
Well, I thank you for saying that, and I know we're running out of time, but for us, we're all in with Polkadot, man, right? People often ask us, why are you a blockchain? And I say, well, our decision was, first, we want to be a layer 1, we want to be a layer 3. We want to be a layer 1 because we wouldn't be able to trust the Ethereum Foundation or Polygon or any other layer 1 foundation to honor and canonize and lionize the same values and mission that we have at Bitgreen. Okay, so we decided layer 1, not layer 3. Should we go our own way, like Cello? Should we be part of a constellation of other chains, Cosmos or Polkadot? And we chose Polkadot very intentionally. And we're happy to be here. It's a superior technology. The network and the participants within the .Sama ecosystem are just fiercely passionate and committed to building this ecosystem. But we would like to see the .Sama ecosystem also become more sustainable, not just offsetting its emissions, but being proactive and innovative, whether it's with Bitgreen or other teams within the ecosystem, to really build out Web3 solutions that help to advance humanity toward a place of betterment and a better future for all of us. And I think that is what will establish Polkadot as a true leader in the space, not only for its technology, but also for its humanism. And that's part of what Bitgreen is trying to bring to the community.
I think it's a good choice. I think Substrate allows us to change the rules of the game how we want. And it's great to have someone like you who brings the right energy to
it's all renewable.
Awesome. And maybe after the call, we can have a conversation on how we can go carbon neutral. I mean, there's a lot of pure.
Well, actually, well, I think we can talk about it. So we're part of a consortium of 2 or 3 other teams within the Datsama ecosystem. We're leading the way on we've already begun doing this, doing an entire carbon audit. So developing a methodology for measuring the electricity consumption of both the Kusama and Polkadot networks. That is both the relay chains and all of the parachains. And then what Bitgreen is going to be doing is creating a dashboard for all that information, so we can see in real time, or like periodically, basically up to every 6 hours, the electricity consumption, and then also the emissions by the combination of the chains. And then there's another team named Sequester, who is our good friends, who have built a palette that then enables all of the different parachain teams to connect this palette and then dedicate some of their treasury resources to immediately purchasing Bitgreen tokenized carbon credits to offset. And we'll be able to track all of this on this dashboard that Bitgreen will be publishing. We'll publish the methodology and make that open source. And then what would be really cool is we want to push this methodology out beyond Polkadot, and then hopefully use this dashboard as like the canonical resource for all layer ones or all those who want to participate to actually track and better like communicate their energy consumption and their emissions. So that project is actually underway, and we introduced it at Decoded in Berlin. There's actually a video with us and the Sequester team on stage talking about it, and we're going to roll out the actual product and the dashboard at Sub-Zero in Lisbon on November 28th and 29th. So anybody who will be there will be in Lisbon, and we'll have the entire dashboard methodology and the initial analysis complete by the end of November.
Awesome. So much that you're doing. How big is the team, Adam?
Well, we were 3 people a little over a year ago. We're now 15. I think we just actually extended an offer to our 16th employee. Totally distributed, Europe, North America, the Middle East, Australia. It's a real like archetype of Web3 post-COVID.
What about South America, Adam?
Are you for hire?
No.
Are you available?
Tell me, just say no.
We actually we were extending an offer to somebody in Brazil right now.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Brazil is beautiful.
And it's like the heart of where we need to be focusing. And Brazilians are beautiful. I love South America and LATAM, actually. I love travel, but especially I have like such a heart for Latin America. And so anyway, yeah, so we're a team of 15, 16. I'm based in New York. And then CTO is in Germany. We have some people in Lisbon. We have some people in Dubai. It's a really beautiful kind of mosaic of different backgrounds and nationalities and languages and influences. A very diverse team.
Yeah, it's also an important part of the whole setup for Web3, and especially
we also have that. Like we have people from all over the world.
Yeah, you know what is so beautiful about Web3 is that it actually is leading the way in terms of diversity, geographic diversity, language diversity, cultural diversity, and we still have a ways to go, but that just seems very native and almost the baseline within Web3. Now, obviously, it's not always possible because there are only so many blockchain developers, right? And many of them happen to be clustered in San Francisco. But I think that blockchain is really leading the way in terms of its diversity and the cross-sectional makeup of its teams. And that's super exciting. Like, you don't need to be a team that comes out of Stanford or Berkeley or Caltech that stays in the Bay Area and raises money from the same angels and the same VCs and launches a product into the same market. Web3 is different.
I think one sign of that is that, like, you see the bits of their own language coming across. I mean, it's just a few words, but this is always a sign of different cultures crashing.
Yeah, I'm New York. My co-founder, or the CTO, is Dennis in Germany. And then Gilad, who's our third co-founder, is half New York, half Israel. And then the rest of the team is just totally distributed. It's really incredible. I feel like we're not only innovating in technology, we're actually innovating on the model for the future of work.
It's just a totally different way of having calls. Like, my call in the afternoon is when it's in the morning for Juliana, and basically one guy from our team is in India and he's basically going to bed already.
Right. Totally.
Okay, Adam, I have a list of many more questions that I cannot ask you today. I hope we find another time in the future to have a conversation. Maybe when we're landing on Polkadot as Mangata. And
yeah, that'd be excellent.
I'd
love to do some events with not only you and like bring you on Bitgreen's future Crowdcast, but also any folks who are in the New York area, even folks who are in Lisbon, because we have some people there. But I'm in New York. I deeply want to connect with people in the Datsama ecosystem, dinners, events, really try to build a momentum for Polkadot and Kusama here in the Big Apple. New York is just too big and influential and has too much gravitas for us to ignore. And I'm here, and I know a few other people are in town, and so we'd really love to connect with any of the people in your network who happen to be in the greater New York area. Feel free to reach out to me, or obviously to send us a message on the Bitgreen website. I'll definitely see that.
Perfect. Well, everybody knows now. Well, Adam, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today and to tell us everything about Bitgreen. Like, we really hope to have you in the future again to talk a lot more about sustainability and Web3 and blockchain. Well, thank you. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And this is going to stay in our YouTube channel so you can see the record.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Tommy and Julian, for inviting me.
Yeah. May the Orwell bless you with infinite rewards.
What was that?
May the Orwell bless you with infinite rewards. That's our like motto, or I don't know.
it's our blessing, you know. Usually we have the slide deck, and then you see our airwheel.
I know. I love it. I love that you united me. By the way, I love the design for your website. It's one of my favorite websites.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, it's great.
All right.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.